Hi, I'm Saras Sarasvathy and I teach entrepreneurship at the Darden Business School, University of Virginia in Charlottesville. Many of you might know that my research involves looking at how expert entrepreneurs make decisions and take action and build ventures and even sometimes new market categories. In the last 5 years or so at Darden, I've been working with some master teachers as well as my research collaborators to come up with teaching materials for teaching some of the research and transferring them into the classroom, both in terms of materials but also exercises and other kinds of pedagogical approaches to teaching entrepreneurship. Let me give you a small example, the example of the ICEHOTEL case. Usually in teaching entrepreneurship, it is traditional to look at very successful companies or really cool technologies that might have a variety of complicated applications and then try to write a case. For example, the e-ink case does that. It's a really interesting technology, really eminent scientists from MIT who came out with the technology, and there are all kinds of possibilities. And so that's like a typical entrepreneurship case that people actually use to teach a technology case. There are many, many out there. It's just that e-ink came to my mind for some reason. So instead, one of the things we started was, let's think about the kinds of things that most first-time entrepreneurs or undergraduate students or MBA students who are thinking of starting a venture would come up with if they have no technology background. I mean, it could be, doggy daycare, that kind of thing. And think through how we would use some of those ideas in building a venture. So in the ICEHOTEL case, what struck me was, on the one hand, the simplicity of the idea. There's not any huge technology involved. But on the other hand, the improbability of anybody building any worthwhile venture, which basically says here is an igloo in the north of Sweden inside the Arctic Circle, and come stay with us. And the idea that not only you could build this venture but actually grow it into something which eventually leads to a partnership with Richard Branson, it's just really, really improbable. So for those of you who are aware of my research, which has to do with effectuation, which is the idea of building ventures using techniques of non-predictive control, seeing the future as fundamentally unpredictable, but even more than that, unknowable. The ICEHOTEL case does a very good job of it because it's just filled with surprises at every step of the way. So let me describe the case. Here is this young man in the north of Sweden who has a little business going in summer with canoes, tourists who want to canoe on his beloved Torne River. And he decides that he needs to have an income in winter too. He's got like 40 boats on the river in summer, but he wants to stay there in winter. So he's one of the, I don't understand why he wants to stay there in the winter, but the fact is he really loves it there. And he decides he needs a revenue stream in the winter. And it's a very mundane idea in the sense that he just starts out by saying, what do other people do who have this much cold and ice and snow and dark in the winter? And he comes upon the Sapporo Film Festival, the Sapporo Ice Sculpture Festival in Japan, and decides, not very surprisingly, let's do an ice sculpture festival in Sweden. And he manages to partner with some Japanese companies and bring some sculptors over and organizes the first ice sculpture exhibition in the north of Sweden. But on the very day that the exhibition opens, where a lot of people are driving up to Sweden and then taking a train and taking planes to come up to this place in the north of Sweden called Jukkasjärvi, it turns out that the temperature shoots up 7 degrees and it starts raining, and the exhibition is basically rained out. And it's a very, very simple case. It's just about 3 or 4 pages, and you can just ask the question to the students, so what do you do next? It's not that difficult for students to put themselves into the shoes of an entrepreneur organizing a little exhibition, even though perhaps the north of Sweden is a little bit more difficult to imagine, but the uniqueness of the place in a way gives activates their imaginative juices, if you will, and they do start thinking about it. And the first instinct usually in an MBA class is to come back and fix the problem, right? To say that, I will do this, I will protect the ice sculpture in a particular way, or I will, I will manage the press to write the right story, and it's all like really, these are alphas in the class who want to fix the problem and make it right. And some of them will say things like, it would not have happened to me because I had to check the weather forecast or something like that. And it's very interesting because almost immediately it puts them in the role of somebody who faces the unexpected, but it also puts them in a context where there are a variety of potential stakeholders who have actually arrived on the train. And it's a good case for getting the alpha types in the class to start thinking about these people who arrive not as adversaries or people whom you can sucker into writing the story you want or things like that, but instead to begin to see them as potential stakeholders, because they also invested time and enthusiasm and expectation in coming up to the Arctic Circle in winter to see an ice sculpture exhibition. They are as disappointed as the entrepreneur is. And there is something very interesting about a shared negative experience with other people. And so that's kind of what I try to focus on in the discussion in the class, and then have the students actually think through, now we all have the shared experience. What do we learn from this and what can we build out of this shared experience? And the ICEHOTEL came out of that shared experience, because as Ingvar, the entrepreneur in the case, walked out and saw the reactions of the people, he found that a lot of people found it kind of interesting that everybody makes all these plans and they come up and, Mother Nature kind of, laughs at them in a way. And so as human beings, the experience is very human and they start laughing at it. And with a little bit of vodka and the local businesses pitching in, people start thinking through, why do we expect that we do things and they have to be permanent? And he begins to understand melting is interesting, transience is interesting. So wouldn't it be interesting to do something, you build something every year and it kind of melts away and then you have to rebuild it from scratch. And over time, and it didn't happen the first time, but over time that evolved into the notion of an igloo where people can actually spend a night and experience this, and then it grew and grew into the ICEHOTEL that we know of today. And that's just the first piece of the case. Thereafter, you have further issues on how do you grow a venture like this. There is an issue of a partnership with Absolut Vodka, and how do you get somebody like Absolut Vodka call you when you are just a dinky little hotel in the north of Sweden with 40 rooms and nobody's ever heard of you. There are other issues about how do you grow this internationally. The story of Absolute Ice Bars is linked to it. So it's just a series of surprises, and most of them not positive surprises either. So it also is a great illustration of the lemonade principle, that every time things go wrong, maybe fixing it is not the way to think about it, but leveraging it. Leveraging even negative surprises. Anything can be an input in an entrepreneurial venture and can be made into some things that are valuable, even though even the entrepreneur and the people involved cannot predict where the value is in that event to begin with.